I made it till the end of the road, but there's a trail that starts here, and it says that it's marked mile marker 0 to 8.1. I don't think I have 16 miles in me, and I don't think the treasure's up there. I don't want to see the fault scrape that bad, but I might go down it a little ways and see what I see. But I seriously doubt an 80-year-old man went 8 miles with this 42-pound box. So we'll check it out and then probably just turn around and head back. Getting pretty wet pretty quickly. Got snow up there, mud. I don't know how far I'm gonna go. Creek is moving fast over here. Definitely not in tennis shoes. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'll put my boots on and see. It's just around the corner. I don't want to get caught out here with an animal. I don't believe at any time of the year maybe you're a guy would walk any part of this distance to some random place up there. I just don't see it. I do not. I don't see it. Oh well. I don't think I ever really planned on going all the way up there. So I hiked up to the top of the peak that I parked right next to. There's really no visibility up here. I'm definitely in the wood though, that's for sure. But I thought I'd be able to see something more interesting from up here. This is kind of a cool little meadow. No trees. A weird cleared area. But on every side around it, there's trees. As far as the eye can see. So, I've had enough of Red Canyon. Back to the park. Whew. Too bad I didn't bring the head strap up here. That's the climb that I have back down to the car. Here goes nothing. Oh, made it. Gee, looks like something off a Lone Survivor. Here. That looks much harder, more painful. I didn't actually fall down. Whew, it's a rough climb though, up in this altitude. Oh goodness. Back down.
Then a rocket ignited automatically, propelling me up another 150 feet, while 2 nylon straps behind my back reeled in, throwing me from the seat, which fell away. When my parachute opened, I remember being surprised by the sudden silence, although it made me suspicious. As pre-planned, I took pictures of the blossomed parachute above me, the jungle through my boots below me, and the plane before it crashed.
This place is the mouth of one of the other creeks that I looked into, but it just, I mean, there's no way. I believe that it's called the, that is the freaking, blah, 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 blah. I don't remember. Some other creek, but it runs along here, and it goes under this bridge, and it goes into a little canyon up that way. But everything is on a grander scale than it looks when I'm looking at it on a computer, you know, so everything's bigger. See, that's, you know, Grayling Creek, there you go. That's exactly it. See, it runs all over the place, and it's got nothing to do with warm water halting or anything. So even though that was an interesting looking spot and it's close to the road, there's nothing about warm water halting here. So
I had about 4.5 tons of fuel on board, and I was watching when it hit halfway up a 1,000-foot high stone bluff. The fireball was huge, and I knew it would attract unwanted attention. Initially, I felt myself going into shock. I was clammy, hot, nervous. Then I remembered what they taught in snake school in the Philippines. 100% of those shot down will go into shock, and it can kill you. Lie down, elevate your feet to get blood to your head, think tranquil thoughts. So I thought about being with my father on the Lampasas River in Texas, with a bobber in the water, catching 5-inch bluegills. In 30 minutes I had recovered and felt strong and confident. And then I remembered the clearing and the beautiful waterfall. It was a stupid thought, but strangely tranquilizing. I felt like I would soon be going home, and I laughed at myself for being so human. Attempts to contact my wingmen by radio were unsuccessful, but the locator beacon in my parachute should have activated automatically. I knew my friends were listening for it. Darkness comes fast in the jungle, and the night served a chilling menu of exciting events, the memories of which have both entertained and humbled me over the years since. I have a strong recollection of sitting on a damp, mossy log, wondering what to do next. I knew the Pathet Lao didn't take prisoners, so when I heard dogs barking in the distance, I quickly opened a large can of pepper that had been zipped in my G-suit for almost a year. After moving a few feet into a particularly dense part of the jungle, I spread the pepper in a circle around me, hoping to deaden the noses of any dogs that might get curious. Because the Air Force didn't issue pepper as survival equipment, a lot of the pilots made midnight requisitions at the mess hall. The Laotian night jungle was a bustle of activity. Small animals constantly made digging noises, and there was a lot of loud squawking. I couldn't decide if those sounds were made by birds or monkeys. It might have been amusing if I'd not known that both cobras and tigers were also around. It was common to see their skins stretched on the tin roofs of Special Forces camps. About midnight there was a bright flash of light that I estimated was just a short distance away. I figured the air rescue guys were dropping parachute flares hoping to recover me before the enemy arrived. Then I experienced what was perhaps the most terrifying event of my life. The giant trees bent over and limbs broke as the shockwave of wind and noise blasted me to my core. The high bluffs behind me magnified the sound, and I thought my lungs might collapse. The roar was so traumatic, I felt that if it happened again, I might not survive. I had experienced the effects of Operation Arclight. 3 B-52 bombers from Guam, flying in formation at 30,000 feet, had dropped 750-pound bombs. Each plane carried 105 such devices, and they were being released one at a time but in rapid succession.
I just drove past the spot where the fire hole splits and goes under the bridge and goes off that way to Old Faithful. But on this side of the bridge, it stays in the search area. Just gonna go take a look at it down here. But you can see now that on both sides, this is a canyon. This entire place is a canyon. Both sides. The road runs right down the middle of it. This is the fire hole. After it goes across the street, it starts to head down toward Old Faithful. Just off the road, right there, where the rivers part, just off the road, there's this trail. And there's a sign right there at the start of the trail. It says this area closed to all human activity. I hope I don't encounter a whole lot of those.
The blast of noise continued for what seemed like forever. 3 or 4 minutes after it stopped, I recovered some of my senses. The jungle was strangely quiet except for the sound of rocks and debris that began to land in the trees and fall around me. One small pebble hit my leg, and I kept it as a souvenir to remind me of why I never saw any generals on the front line. The B-52s came to see me again several hours later, but I was ready. When I saw the first flash, I hunkered down behind a log and tightened up as best I could. Nevertheless, I am convinced that thousands of animals, human and otherwise, were killed in Vietnam by sound alone. At first light, I was making notes about what had happened. This is what I wrote while sitting under a forest of 300-foot-high trees that were covered with white orchids as far up as I could see. Made first pass 250 degrees into the sun, 200 feet, 500 knots airspeed, trying to surprise. Probably got hit on that pass. At the end of the run, I whifferdilled up and to the right and back out of the sun, hoping to blind the guns I knew were there. Expended inboard CBU-34. Near the end of the pass, I got hit by probably 10 ZPU. That's 50 caliber machine guns tied together and firing with one trigger. Shooting from the side of a hill about 2,000 feet on my left and level with me.
I'm telling myself that, in The Alchemist it says that when you're in pursuit of your personal legend, that the universe conspires to help you. And I don't know, it just seems like with the weather and just every wrong turn I've taken on the way here has led me to something else cool, and it just seems like everything is trying to go my way. I just have to take that final step myself and have the balls to actually get in a freaking wetsuit and go climbing a river. But, just as I was thinking about that just now, I walked by a guy walking up to the geyser that I just left wearing a chive hoodie. So, as I'm having these thoughts, another omen comes across my path as I'm wearing a chive shirt. I just feel like it's all on me to decide if I want to push this as far as it can go. And I know I'm going to be disappointed if I don't. But I just don't know if I can make myself do it. Easier said than done. Maybe I'll have a look at it here in just a minute.
Hits in nose, both drop tanks, canopy shot off, plus some in aft section because I got immediate compressor stalls and the oil pressure started down. I pulled around abruptly and turned all 4 gun switches on so I could mark the guns that shot me. My 20mm bullets were incendiary and had explosive warheads, the blasts from which were lethal up to 20 feet. Then headed 30 degrees for bailout and instructed wingmen to hit with all ordnance the guys that had hit me. Later, one of my wingmen, Lieutenant Gary Van Vallen, said something to the effect that, "I saw the guys shooting at you and I got him." Although my engine had flamed out, with my remaining airspeed, I had been able to get about 30 miles away from the target area and make it to a peaceful-looking part of the jungle. Later that morning at 7:55, Lieutenant James Swisher, the forward air controller who had directed my flight the night before, came looking for me. From 7 miles away, he had been the first to say I was on fire. With the help of my little radio, we were united, and he told me to hang tough, that he would be back, and then he left. Well, I remember thinking I'd just as soon he would hang around for a while, but he had work to do, and within a few minutes, the sky was full of American warplanes, all intent on doing things that were in my best interest. I really love those guys. While the sandy, propeller-driven fighters strafed the jungle all around to keep the enemy heads down, 2 Jolly Green Giant helicopters arrived. My rescue was being coordinated by a Crown C-130 aircraft circling at 15,000 feet.
Well, obviously the weather has not kept people away, so that's a negative. But it's also made for much better weather while I'm here. That's good. I haven't been over to Black Sand Basin yet, which is the warm waters that I believe is where you're supposed to start this. The poem, the first clue in the poem, I think, starts over there. So I'm hiking down from the observation point for Old Faithful right now, And I'm just going to check out some other geysers over here. There's paths all over the place that I'll probably just walk and see where they take me for a while. But by lunchtime, I expect to be over on the Black Sand Basin side and get my first look at.
The pickup chopper came in low, while the standby waited high in case it was needed. The 240-foot cable ride up on a heavy iron jungle penetrator through a tangle of breaking limbs, leaves, and tree trunks took my breath away.
Looks like some animals got a little closer. It's highly illegal. These pools are amazing. You can see all the way to the bottom of them. Solitary geyser, this one is called. Not much geysering going on. What?
When I reached the hovering helicopter, Flight Engineer Master Sergeant Maples had his left hand on the guillotine, a cable-cutting device that would have allowed him to chop my line if the plane started taking battle damage, or if I had somehow become irretrievably wrapped around a tree, endangering the helicopter and the crew. But instead, when I reached the top, A1C Robert Sully grabbed the hoist and swung me in the door. "Quick, get in the back and sit on a flak vest," he yelled. He didn't have to say it twice. As the helicopter sped up and away, I started taking inventory. Both my face and head were bleeding in a few places, but nothing serious. My left shoulder ached, and my arms and legs, although bruised, were intact. My pistol and Minox camera were gone from my body, but my folding hat was still in my G-suit pocket. Everything considered, it was a great ride.
I imagine this is probably a slow day, but still, I've seen at least 100 different people. More than that, probably.
An hour later, we landed at Nakhon Phanom, Thailand, where we were greeted by a couple of generals and a camera crew. I was the 1,500th airman to be rescued by the Air Rescue Service in Southeast Asia. It was a noteworthy milestone for them and a humbling honor for me. The next day, while climbing out in a C-130 and headed back to my home base at Toi Hoa, the pilot asked me if I wanted to talk to my wife. So with patches through Saigon, Guam, and Barry Goldwater in Scottsdale to Lubbock, Texas, Peggy and I spoke and said foolish things while everyone listened. She had received a telegram saying I had been shot down and no parachute had been seen. When we landed at my home base at Toi Hoa, I told my boss I didn't want to be shot down on my last mission, and begged for one more. Every pilot's dread is to be shot down on his first mission, or his last, and when the latter happens, it's a terrible bust on the morale for those remaining. A 4-star general in Saigon gave his blessing, saying, "But keep him in South Vietnam." After that mission, it was time to pay my debt to the waterfall and the magical clearing to which I felt so obligated.
About to head across the road over to the, oh geez, I don't know where to go from here. Doesn't look like there's much of a path. Did I miss it? Anyway, I'm going over across the road to the Black Sand Basin side.
After some strong begging, an Army helicopter flying friend agreed to take me. It was about an hour's flight to where the little stream dropped so mistfully onto the rocks below. When we landed, the geography looked much different from what I expected, and from what I had seen from a mile up. The small clearing was now about 300 feet across, and belly-high grass made walking difficult. It was impersonal and disappointing. I was embarrassed and felt foolish for making such a big deal about something that now seemed whimsical. Besides, this was enemy country, and although it seemed remote, we didn't know who might be nearby. Helicopters make a lot of noise, so we agreed to stay only 5 minutes. After sitting on the edge of the waterfall and throwing rocks over the drop, the pilot said, "Let's go." The sound of the rushing water was stronger than the noise of the idling engine, and I was a little uncomfortable with the whole episode. As we rose and started walking in the tall grass toward the helicopter, a a strange chain of events began to unfold. I tripped over something and fell flat on my face. That never happens to me. Then when I started to push myself up, I came nose to nose with a rude aluminum grave marker. How strange and out of place it seemed.
I'm walking along the highway in Iron Spring Creek here because I hiked to the walking trails along all the lower geyser basin. I guess this is down by Old Faithful. And you can hear the frogs from the road. I don't know if you can hear that, but this isn't the area that I'm going to search. I'm going to go to the other side, the Black Sand Basin. I think I'm going to drive up there and park and then try to sneak into those little evergreens. It's like the road is lined with little evergreens like this, about 7 feet tall, so you can't really see through them. But there are patrol cars that come up and down this road. There's one coming toward me right now. Some guy came to my car at like 3 o'clock in the morning, tried to, almost made me leave. He said you can't sleep in your car at Old Faithful, so definitely can't do that again. I gotta go up toward the Madison River and the junction of the Madison River and the Firehole River. There's a campground up there. I'll probably set up my tent there for the last 2 nights. But probably this evening, when it cools down a little bit and there's not so many people out there. It's definitely not a busy day, but still a lot of people out walking around. I'll see about sneaking down there into the creek, take a look around. There may have been a better way to get back from Black Sand Basin, but I didn't see anybody doing it. Most of the people had driven over there. Maybe that's why. But there were 2 guys in front of me that were walking this way, and I just started following them. I'm almost back now.
I could barely read the dirty nameplate, but did make out the name of a French soldier. Then suddenly we saw more grave markers. The more we looked, the more we found. These soldiers had evidently been killed during the French Indochina War in 1947. But I had tripped over a crudely made stone grave marker that had fallen face down in the grass. Before I could roll it over to see what it said, the pilot was strapping in. I had to hurry. A French name and rank was followed by arching English words across the top. If you should ever think of me, when I have passed this veil, and wish to please my ghost, forgive a sinner and smile at a homely girl. Those words burned in my brain, and I could see them just as clearly now as I did then, when I was so rushed. I took care to replace the stone marker as it had fallen, and smoothed the grass to hide it over. The promise that place had made to me had been kept, and mine to it as well. How innocent and foolish all of that seemed at the time, and even more so that a strangely insidious something began to gnaw on me. This could not be the end of it. There was no feeling of closure at all, no sense of completeness. It was disappointing. Is it fair that no one recalls where those brave French soldiers fell, and are now interred in that remote jungle clearing, hidden from life for a million sunsets? After a violent ending, they've been swallowed up in a serenely beautiful place, and at the same time hidden by the ravages of time and nature. Those who fell there in that hateful, wasteful, losing war, like the one in which I was involved, are forever forgotten, save by me. It has been 56 years since that war, and no one cries anymore. That thought is deeply personal and indelible in me, even now, 42 years after I was there. My experience beside the waterfall was on December 22nd, 1968. 2 nights later, I walked in my front door in Lubbock to be greeted by my lovely wife and 2 beautiful daughters. It was Christmas Eve. For the next month while I was on leave, the flourish of activities related to homecoming and reuniting with family and friends put my jungle thoughts on hold, except for occasional flashes that insinuated something unfinished. I didn't know enough about what had happened to even speak of, much less understand what I was feeling, and what it could possibly mean, if anything. It took weeks to digest, as thoughts slowly started to seep back. What was this all about? Was it nothing? It was all a blur in my mind, like a dream that kept floating in and out. Before the war started, I didn't even know where Vietnam was, or Southeast Asia for that matter. It was so unlikely that I would be a fighter pilot and fly to that place. Why did the strange clearing mean so much to me? Why did I survive 328 combat missions but get shot down twice? Was it only to be drawn to that place? What kind of fool would take a defenseless helicopter to that waterfall? It was more than strange that I would fall on the ground and read such a poignant inscription. And why did the words impact me so? I had a lot to think about. As the months passed and I got back into the swing of Air Force life, which by then involved teaching other men to fly, my thoughts naturally started to analyze the things that had hitherto been but a blur of incoherent incidents. Then one day in 1969, as I was looking through my flight log, my eyes fixed on an entry that had only a brief explanation, but I knew. I remembered every detail of that flight and why I had marked it like that. That flight had been many years before, 13 to be exact, on the 13th of July, 1956. I had taken an old T-33 jet trainer from Stephenville, Newfoundland to Pope Field, North Carolina. A party at the officers' club in Stephenville had detained me longer than I wanted, and although I was not a drinker, my body was already tired.
I've been thinking about her all day. It's just, if I'm not successful here, I don't know what to do with myself with regard to that situation. And she doesn't, that's the junction, right? Doesn't deserve or need to have me constantly trying to talk to her. Because she's good for me, but if I'm not good for her, then, I'm not any good for her. So, why? Because. That's why. Because I don't want to lose her in my life. If it's just torturing me, then so what? Always gonna think about her. I have no business being with anyone anyway, so I'm just stuck thinking about this one, right? That's all there is to it. No, this would not have happened with anybody. I can't believe this happened to me. After what I had just come out of, I fell into this that just, hurts me. I'm glad it's just on me. I'm glad my kids didn't get involved. I'm glad she didn't ever have to come into contact with my ex. I was literally living two separate lives. Keeping my kids away from her and all the details of that existence, and keeping her away from my life completely, and also trying to be a part of her life with her family and what she had going on. It's hard, but I get out of it, and it's like nobody even knows what the pain would have been like, because all the pain is on me. What's with all these people?
At about midnight, I lifted off for a long, dark flight that would take me down the length of the eastern seaboard, across a blur of lights that never slept. Boston, Providence, Hartford, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, Norfolk, and on. Because of the great distance involved, it was necessary to climb as high as possible, 49,000 feet, to save fuel. Blood will bubble in the human body if pressurization is lost at 50,000 feet, unless the pilot is wearing a pressure suit. I knew I was pushing it, and the plane's oxygen system was antiquated, but the rules of flight were not unknown to me, and I was a careful pilot.